Dankjewel. And thank you for coming. I do speak Dutch, I just feel more comfortable in professional stuff with English. So I will be speaking English. As it was announced, I trust that everybody will understand me. So I will be talking about perimeter security. Just to get a quick of information. Who of you knows what that is? I mean, you made it in the talk. You possibly found it interesting enough, right? So from the quick hands, I'd guess roughly half. Who of you is more on the compliancy side and who actually has worked with a network? You've not worked with it. Two people have worked actually in network. Okay, good. So this talk is based on a talk that I used to give on a computer security conference that got a rather good feedback. And my colleague saw that after that, which is Firas, and he said, you need to give this talk on our conference. So invited me over here. So I'm Elmar Lecher. I'm a security advisor at the Port of Rotterdam. What does that mean? We actually develop software for ports, and I'm responsible at security for the security development of software. That does contain, to a larger degree, also a bit of the network and the concept of those networks. I call myself hacker. I actually call myself a proud hacker. I come from the dark side of the internet. So my history in the past was more on the darker side, but I'm a security professional. I'm an NPC for the not gamer. For the not gamers of you, that means I'm a figure in a computer game. I am deeply involved in hacker spaces, and I would recommend you to at least find out what that is and possibly have a look in your local one if it's interesting for you. And I do a lot with wood. For my history, I started in the BBS age. That is when the computer made those weird sounds when you connected to the thing before the internet. I call myself a hacker since 1996. I speak in computer security conferences since 1999. For the rest, I'm pretty sure you all can read. I am in the Netherlands since 2016, and since 2020, I'm seriously trying to speak Dutch. So if you see me outside, speak Dutch to me. I really need that training. It's a bit annoying, this country. You try to take all your Dutch together, speak to somebody, and they immediately switch to English. So, LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. Mastodon is the successor of Twitter over there, and Matrix is also a communication tool. That is a mix of Signal and Discord. But motivation for the talk. As being a security consultant, I was employed at TNT and have built solutions there when something happened. Before that, I'm a computer professional basically since 2001. I've built a lot of computer networks built on the concept of perimeter security. The networks got better, we had better technology, we had more complex technology, but it did not help. On the 27th of June, I still know the date, I worked at TNT. And as you those of you possibly remember, TNT got a malware infection that was really bad. It looked like a crypto, like an encrypting malware. Today we know it was basically an attack of the Russians to the Ukraine, and everybody else was kind of collateral damage in that. And I have to say, one of the most impressive experiences with that was from the first indications of compromise till basically all Windows computers were gone, took 8 minutes. Just to give you an idea how quick that goes. I was employed at TNT actually as a consultant to help them pass a SOX 2 audit. Like the mother company is FedEx, and they need the SOX 2 audit because they traded at the New York Stock Exchange. FedEx had taken over TNT. TNT needed to get this audit. I was brought in. We passed the audit with flying colors roughly a week before this. And we were all still busy with the cleanup from the audit. I'm pretty sure you know what I mean, right? So after the audit, there is still some work to be done that better gets done immediately. Events like this let you think of the solution you have been building for all of the years. are really the best solutions. So, not only technology itself needs to change, ways of working needs to change, principles of software security sometimes need to be overthought and possibly need to change. And this talk is about this change. So you've seen in the presentation and the lineup that this talk is about parameter security. Wikipedia says, well, you can all read that. Trust you can. But basically, a parameter is a line that defines there is an inside and an outside. So the term actually comes from the military environment. And you're supposed to, like if you ever see a military installation that has this multiple fence things, that is their parameter, that is the line that they're trying to defend. Historically speaking, if you talk to networked people, and you'll understand why I said weirdly later, this is very often given as a castle. Who knows the graphics of a castle for your company network? Who have seen something like that before? I see some people nodding. Yeah. A graphics you're possibly more known to is something like this. So you have an outside of the network, you have a gateway that's very often called the firewall, and then you have an inside of the network. So I'd like to step a bit back and try to see how we actually got there. The first machine that I actually had to think about this was the mainframes. Like, think in 1980s and before, really big, like those of you who work at banks, insurances, and companies like that, you might still have them. Usually you're not allowed to touch them. In the mainframe, in the original time, that is an IBM mainframe, one of the first ones. That is what most people picture as a mainframe very often. If you're a bit more nerdy computer games, it's possibly more this one. That is also a mainframe. That was the first moment when computers actually were connected to basically anything, and the biggest risk of that were kids that wanted to play chess and thermonuclear war. For those who don't get the reference, there's an awesome movie that's called War Games. You possibly really should watch it. After that, the first computer networks were more with the protocol of IPX. That was, TCP was available, but for the first 15 years, that was more something for the academic world. Possibly the old people of you remember Novell NetWare. The functionality was sharing files and printers. Then with Novell NetWare 4, they moved to TCP IP-based Novell NetWare. This is also the times where you had Windows 2000 servers and Samba networks. Basically, the functionality was still the same. You shared network folders and printers. Shortly after that came client-server applications. So think of the old SAP. Right, so you had a server somewhere in your first-year basement. At some point, you probably got a proper server room, maybe even a data center. You put your one of the most important servers in there, where your SAP and the like. In the beginning, there was more different tools that actually were used, but SAP is the one that survived till today, and this is the more common one. People had a laptop, or not a laptop. People did not have a laptop by then. People had a desktop that talks to a server. The server is somewhere in this sad room with all the computers and the wires in there. And then suddenly, the internet. Yeah. So with the internet came suddenly the desire of the companies to connect their network to this internet. And that was relatively easy because you already spoke TCP IP on the network. So the thing that you got was a router that very quickly we discovered should have a firewall that restricts the access between the internet, the inside, and the outside. That is the moment where for our livable world, the parameter security became important. So we now had an inside, we had a firewall, and we had an outside. So we slowly moved to intranet application. What do I mean by that? Intranet applications are applications that still run in your company, in your sad room where all the computers are in, but it's using internet technology where this name clearly comes from. So it's mostly based on TCP/IP, and in theory it could work over the internet. In practice, our connections were still way too slow to do that in efficient ways. This is the more modern implementation of SAP. Next thing that happened were external data centers. At some point, this room in the basement became a bit too small to actually house all of the computers, so we decided to be more professional and actually got to a company that offers this as a service. That was called a data center, and we basically moved all of our computers into this thing. That's interesting because from a computer security standpoint, your boundaries between your physical location and your virtual computer location become detached because that is part of your perimeter. We decided to go more steps. We, at this point, usually got something that's called VLANs. I'm pretty sure you've heard of that. We started to have firewalling rules between those VLANs. We tried to bring all the network a bit into order, to categorize it nicely, have a nice IP plan in the company, spread all this. Yeah. This, as said, means that the perimeter extends to the company buildings, and there were now virtually multiple gates to the internet. VPN. The next technology that came that made our perimeter a bit more complex is the VPN. In the beginning, it was mostly interesting for what we used to call road warriors. So the people that had a laptop and were usually out by the customer simplified the technicians and the salespeople. So they got a VPN in the beginning. They were then allowed to work from somewhere else, which is not at home, not in the company. We'll get to this home later. And that means that now computers all over the world were part of the company network, and by that, the perimeter. You could, and that was the idea of it, you could reach from your computer somewhere at a customer, your home company. But that also means you're exposed at that point, because the computer's actually not on the inside. We get intelligent firewalls. I spoke about how the security got better. We got application firewalls. Some of you might know that as Web Application Firewall or WAF. But also IDS, IPS systems. We were able to make SSL interception and like breaking this nasty encryption that we have. And we also became user-aware firewalls. So a firewall that was claiming that they can actually tell which user is doing which connection. Don't trust them. We're getting further and big steps. We got software as a service. Who of you uses Office 365? That's software as a service. You buy something, it's completely not in your control anymore. It's running somewhere else on the planet. You maybe choose a region, and if you have some people really dig into, you might actually find out what that actually means, where the system really stands, but you're really physically detached to that. But it becomes part of your perimeter network because a lot of people configure your software as a service setup in the way of, this can only be reached over my company network. Make this only available over this IP range. I see some people nodding here. I got the feeling that approach is known to some people. I need to click faster. We got platform as a service. AWS and Azure, pretty sure is a term to you. It's very often also called infrastructure as a service. These servers that we had in our data centers now became virtual servers. So there is no physical server anymore. And a lot of the ideas and protection thoughts that we have circle around the point that our systems in the basement before are actually physical computers that have an operating system that I have under control and all the applications on top of that. That's not necessarily true anymore, but it also becomes difficult because if you don't pay the extra money for fixed IPs, you will see that connections coming from this world might differ. So one time you got this IP, another time you got that IP. It's usually from a certain specific IP range, but it's not as simple anymore as kind of in ye old times, where you had a server that did run an operating system where I have to control the updates and all of that stuff, and I know precisely which IP it had. That just is gone. The parameter now extends to this network. And they got our infrastructure as a service. We have this at the moment with printers. Because our printers don't print anymore without an internet connection. And when we print, we actually print to a server far out in the world, and that sends then a print command to our servers, to our printers in the local company. And shortly after that, magically, the document that I wanted comes out of this printer after having traveled half around the world and back. Because if you buy this at the big companies, the servers do not stand in Europe. And then COVID. COVID had a really, really, really big impact on that. Because suddenly, we couldn't take the employees in the house anymore. They were working from home. They were working from the coffee shops, and this is the Netherlands. I mean, the place was coffee. They were working from like your local co-working places. They were working at their friends. They were working at all the places in the world, and it became really normal for us. But that now means that all of those networks are at least attached to your parameter network, and your laptop extends to that network. That's important because a threat on this network might endanger the laptop in there. And yes, you can save against that, but the problem is not the laptop itself. The problem is the connection that this laptop has that is going into your company network. So, as you would possibly see, this parameter looks very interesting meanwhile. And one of the things that I usually ask as consultant to people when I'm going to a company is, draw your company network. Can you actually still do that? Because that's not a question of you trying to memorize your company network. That is, for me, usually a question to see how much of the problem they brought themselves into do they actually understand. Because this becomes really hard now to just do the simple thing, draw your company network. It's all the places you're in. So after I explained the parameter, I'm coming to the next thing. It's about compliancy. The parameter network has become a cornerstone of most of the InfoSec compliancy frameworks. Who has a kind of a parameter security with an inside, an outside, and a firewall within their company security policies? Okay, who doesn't? Possibly quicker. Okay, no one. And that's okay. It served us well over a lot of years. It is also true for other two aspects I'm mentioning later. But yeah, why am I actually giving this talk? Because there is a problem with that. Defining a parameter sounds easy. I mean, it's the inside, I'm having my desktops, my laptops, my servers. But as you say in the question I'm asking, it's actually a bit complicated. One of the first problems you run into is that if you have an inside and an outside, usually the security on the inside becomes less strong. I mean, in the end, that's the idea. Why do I build a castle? So I don't have to check everything on the inside of that, and I actually have a chance of defending that. But yeah, if you see that your perimeter spans over the office building, the cloud services, a data center, several coffee shops, lots of places where people live with their kids and other people in there, that has become a problem because there is connectivity in there. We found that out the hard way. Because this connectivity between them enables lateral movement. Lateral movement is when malware hops from one computer to another. or in company terms, when malware hops from one computer to all the others, which is the worst case. Okay, so we just block the traffic. That is, we don't deem useful, and we kind of come up with policies on how to guide this. And I'm pretty sure every one of you has less than 100, 150, 200 firewall rules, that they all totally understand why they're there. It's very often a funny thing. If you actually review suddenly the firewall rules, you'll possibly find out there is a fair part of that you don't really know why it's there. So this, we block every traffic that is not defined as useful is easier said than done, especially on a Windows network. Who of you does not work on a Windows network? Good, I see you're the target audience for the talk. Why is this a problem on the Windows network? So if you ever worked with Windows, you likely have heard the term of the Active Directory, which is how most people do that. Active Directory does not need one port on your internet. It needs a zoo of ports. It's a list of, I would say, somewhere around 15-ish. And the problem is, due to the way how it works, you can't just easily open it in one direction. You need to open it in both directions. So likely, because you have administrators in their company that want to be able to move to different rooms and connect to different power plugs, you have firewall exceptions in your different VLANs, you remember from earlier, that open all of those Active Directory ports, because otherwise it is hard to work and use the features of that. But I'm just putting this in the words of an attacker. From an attacker standpoint, this is the only interesting ports on your computer network. So by this, you just opened the only interesting port of your computer network, likely from basically every computer to every other computer. So from an attacker standpoint, you do not have an internal firewall, and you do not have an internal VPN, internal VLANs. There's other stuff coming with that. At the same time, we talked about Active Directory. One thing that comes very quickly with Active Directory is actually user management. Now, I mentioned there's two things that also plays a role in this attacks. User management is one of them. Anybody an idea why? And user that exists on one computer also exists on most of the others. So if I am an attacker, that means I can just hop the different users. I don't need to break everybody's password, I just need to break one person's password. And then I can basically log into all of the computers. You see the problem with that? This becomes problematic specifically when that users happen to be something of an administrator. And that was one of the features that NotPetya as malware successfully tried to exploit. So another problem in there, administrating large fleets of computers. Usually you install in large companies' computer by using images. You know what that is? Basically, I'm not putting the DVD in there to install the USB stick, the internet connection. To install this computer, I'm basically having an image that I'm putting on your computer that defines that everything is the same on every computer, right? So from an administrator standpoint, I have a known situation on the laptop that makes debugging and trying to find mistakes and why people can't work a lot easier. From an attacker standpoint, that means all the computers are the same. Attacking them is easy because what worked on one computer very likely will work on the other computers. That also means usually you have the same local admin password. The local admin password is, some shake their heads now, they have actually solved this issue already. Congratulations, this is actually important. So the administrator password in most companies, and at least till 2020, was basically printed out in an envelope that is hanging on the wall in the administrator's room and maybe at their boss's safe. It is super important. Only like 5 people in the company are supposed to use it, to know it. The local admin is an account that nobody is supposed to use. except all of the update processes in your company. Nearly all of them run as local admin. Some of you, I think, already know where this is going. So, I call it, we've created the unholy trinity there. We have a perimeter network where every computer can reach every other computer. We have a centralized user management, so that means computers and thereby users are more or less identical on all the different systems, and we have identical computers, which makes it for attackers really a lot of easy. I don't say that with a perimeter network you have to end at this solution. It just is very likely you end in something like this. And this unholy trinity enables lateral movement, so the movement of hackers or of attackers from one computer that might got infected to all of the computers that got infected. So, now we're coming to the next topic, ransomware and malware. In this came ransomware. I'm pretty sure every one of you have heard that. First one to come was that got a bit more famous was Petya. That was in 2016. That was the first really ransomware that actually managed to have large-scale impacts and that took down whole companies. A bit more common, and I'm pretty sure that most of you have heard about this, was WannaCry. The thing that hit me personally in a situation where we've been the most compliant ever was not Petya. Just to give you an idea, does any one of you have an estimate how big the TNT network is? How many computers this is? It's around 45,000 computers and 9,000, so it's over 9,000 servers. So that is a big network, and a lot of your strategies when it comes to disaster recovery will not work if you have to do all of them at the same time. Most disaster recovery plans are only built for one system dies or one small system group of system of dies. Try to make the exercise in your company and say, all of your Windows computers are dead. Now make a company network again that we can work. You see the problem in there, right? Because you will have to install all of those computers. I'll give a very quick summary how NotPetya worked. Basically, it was coming over an update process of Ukrainian text software. It searched within your what's called RFC 1918, so your local networks. For other computers, when the update ran, it was an update. It did run. It brought a tool that's called Minicuts. That Minicuts is a tool that can, under Windows till today, extract the password of the running process. Your Windows network, it's an admin, it runs on a local admin. You do know that at that point, that is your local admin password. It uses then this username and password to try to log into other computers. When a user is logged in on this system, it can also extract the password of that user. If that user is a domain controller, like a domain admin, bingo. That is what happened to us. That means that your nice Active Directory, which is very good in helping you to install software on all the computers at the same time, does precisely that, install software on all the computers at the same time. In our case, that was the malware. And that's how, within 8 minutes, all of the desktops in our company logged. I'd like to have a side word here over complexity. I'm a bit having to look an eye on the time, 30 minutes. Exactly, good. Complexity. The parameter got complex, our networks got complex, our solutions are complex, and we need to understand complexity enables mistakes. So if you're actually in a situation of having to choose a less complex situation, a simpler complex situation over a really complicated solution that might actually be a tiny bit better, think well if you choose the complex situation, specifically when you're not having the same people in your company for the last 20 years. I know those companies exist where brain drain is not a problem. In most companies, a certain part of the employees are changing basically every year. So I promised to not only talk about the parameter security and why this is all a problem. From a compliancy standpoint, you can pretty much see we have a set of rule that enforces a certain technology setup that has their technical problems of their own. If done well, it doesn't mean it will hit you. There is a lot of single places where you can load, like the administrator password for every person is a solution that you can have within your network. But I will be talking today about the way out that we took at or we are taking at the Port of Rotterdam, and that's called Zero Trust. I'm pretty sure you had a lot of salespeople at your doors already that wanted to sell you this, right? Be skeptical. Try to understand what the idea really behind is, because as much as cloud was roughly 10 years ago, where everything was suddenly named cloud, at the moment everything is named AI, even if there's just machine learning in there behind that. That's the same with Zero Trust. A lot of solutions that you hear at the moment are labeled Zero Trust, even though they're not necessarily connected to the thought. Be specifically aware also from computer company and specifically network companies that try to sell you this concept as Zero Trust. I'm a person that has in my company made myself kind of a name of being skeptical to promises from salespeople in general, specifically in security where I work. I can recommend it. You will quickly find out why. So in Zero Trust, there are some principles: never trust, always verify, implement least privilege, and assume breach. Some of those things might be already known to compliancy, specifically the one that is implement least privilege. That is something that we have in most companies, actually. Don't know if you've heard this RBAC, role-based access control. That basically, in the theory, means implement the least privilege. The beef that I'm having with that is that with RBAC and Windows company networks, I think group review in Microsoft networks doesn't work because there is no good tools for this. Just a question, do you know how many times more groups you have as users? Just the way how I'm asking, you're possibly getting like, why should we have more groups than users? So if you have 5 times as many groups as users, that's normal. You're not in a bad spot. In my personal feeling, the bad spot starts somewhere at 7 times more people than users, and it goes even further. The problem really is that in a Microsoft-based network, there just aren't really any tools that gives you an idea to when a person that is responsible for a group has gone, how to actually review what this was supposed to be for and what is the rights before that. And it's really complicated to see the rights associated into a group. That's a lot of clicking and very little stuff that can be easily, nicely important and analyzed, and this is why group review or group rights review usually in companies is not so much of a thing. Zero trust doesn't mean you don't need to trust anything anymore. It basically means that we're not giving a trust benefit based on an IP. So internet address, IP address, this 10.100.something that you maybe have in your company. At home you might have 192.168. Those networks are called RFC 1918 networks. That is very likely what you will have within your company, because IP addresses at the moment are roughly €2 an IP address, and giving every user a real public IP address would be an unnecessarily expensive exercise for a company. It means that I'm treating my whole internet, my whole local network like the internet with all the dangers that are connected to that. I'm verifying things. I'm not trusting somebody on network ranges, so what do I trust on? It's actually called certificates, usually client certificates. It's basically the digital equivalent of an ID card that I can stuff in an IP connection. And with this, I can verify users with the client certificate and resource like systems with a system certificate. Implement least privilege. Only grant rights needed to do the task efficiently and no more. I already mentioned this sounds easier. This is really easier said than done, because there really is a lack of tools to enable you to do a good user right review and group right review. That really is hard with the given talks. and assume breach. So that means have a plan for when something happens. You usually likely have disaster recovery plans. Try to test them not on a tiny scale, on a larger scale, and test them at all. Talk to your security. They might actually like the idea of doing some kind of chaos experiments, so walking basically in one department in the morning and saying all your Windows computers are gone. Now try to get our company back into a state that we actually can work and live and do what we are supposed to do. How would you do that? I saw that on TNT. This is sometimes really difficult. We had our disaster recovery plans in a safe. The number for the safe was in the document management system. The document management system was gone. We de facto didn't have disaster recovery plans. So there is something that I'm at busy very moment is that micro-segment your network ideally into applications and reduce dependencies. That means reduce the amount, reduce it that computers depend on each other, as in I need A to work so I can work with B. Try to at least become aware of this. What are my dependencies in my ICT network, as you say in the Netherlands? What are my dependencies and reduce them as fast as possible. Application security, that's critical, but to be honest, that's a talk of an own. I can possibly give that at some point, but not today. But this is an important topic. So if you write your own applications, there's companies that you likely have talked to. There's pen testing companies. Tell them, I don't want a piece of paper. I really want to improve the security of my network. It will take double the time, but it's totally worth it. Strong encryption. This does not only mean that you encrypt something to be sure that nobody looks into, it's also to protect identities. If I have a proper client certificate and a system certificate, I can mathematically prove I'm really talking to the client of that user and that computer I gave him. That is way more secure than saying I'm trusting an IP. A lot of users use cloud software for their work every way. Like I'm pretty sure you have a lot of people that only use Office 365. The reason why they actually need to be on the company network is actually gone. There is no security reason anymore for that those people are on the network. There might be site requirements. Very often I will hear HR at this point, but I need to write hours or other company internal things. But yeah, backups. I don't think anyone needs an explanation, right? Test the backups, really. So, how do I get there? Identify the tools that are in the way of moving clients out of the perimeter. If you have an HR software, that is SAP. You likely write your hours in SAP, and people ask for their vacation in SAP. That means they need to be able to talk to SAP, and SAP is, for me, the classical application that forces people on the perimeter network because the security concept of SAP is not really 2025. The new versions are a bit better, but only a bit. Move those services out. For example, for the writing of the hours and the writing of applications, I can write a small web application that actually talks to SAP itself. Or I am building a proxy if my company is not tech savvy enough and doesn't want to pay somebody, and I'm building a proxy where I'm checking for the client certificates that gives precisely those systems access to that from the network. Rinse and repeat. If you repeat this cycle, it will make your perimeter smaller and smaller and smaller, and at the end, likely only the administrators need to stay on the networks, which is the ones that are really hard to get out. But those are really tech savvy in general, and they usually know what they're doing, and your malware infection usually doesn't start with them. So that is a good part. So, this talk was about change. It's like, as I said earlier, not only technology and ways of working needs to change, also dogmen of the ICT world needs to change. This was about this change. And I said in the beginning that I really like the comparison of castles for perimeter security. Do you know why? There's no castles used for defense anymore. All of them are either museums or piles of rubble. Your pick. Thank you very much for those talks. Does anyone have questions?
Anybody? Yes, I see the question.
Hi, thank you. My name is Simone. I have a question specifically for Zero Trust. Zero Trust, in your presentation, was primarily for, of course, never trust, always verify. But this is from a network perspective, it's extremely bandwidth consuming from device and user role to access one specific resources, one specific machine.
I will agree it is work, but if you identify that you have a problem with something specifically in the way of working that endangers your company, I think from a risk standpoint you have 2 points. One of them is to do something about this. The other one is to chemically accept that risk.
Okay.
I would not recommend that. I recommend that so little that I actually talk about the topic because it really killed the company I work for, which was D&D. I know it is a lot of work to move from a classical network where I have a parameter around that to a zero trust network where I need to basically chop my company network in smaller parts. I mean, that's only give a very, very short introduction to possibilities. But basically what I do is create smaller departments to give access to
I get it. I get it.
but yeah, changing to away from this network is a lot of work. And possibly a bit depressive here. Usually you will have to get codes, so you will have to have a couple of security incidents that before you manage and it's going to change something on that.
Okay. My last question, if I may. Here, of course, in Zero Trust, it's always referred to the concept to have more attribute-based access control than role-based access control, right?
That is for most of them, part of that in the sense of implement least privilege, yes. There is, the room is small enough that I can speak. Well, why do I have a microphone? Yes. Then it's also on the recording. So yes, that can be an aspect of that. For me, it's not a primary aspect. For me, really, the primary aspect is starting with the network and eliminating the routes between these different systems. If you kick your people out of your company, you're eliminating a route that actually means there is no connection anymore to, like, have you ever tried to get from your laptop that's at home to the laptop of your colleague that is somewhere in a coffee shop? That's really hard from a standpoint, and that is the same for an attacker. If you're all in the same VPN, it becomes really easy. So yes, I know what you mean, and it's an exercise that you can spend a lot of time on. It's, for me, not the core of Zero Trust, but it is an aspect that you very likely will run into these questions, yes.
We have a thank you for Elmar. And it's lunchtime, so you're expected back at 1:30. Thank you, Elmar.
Welcome. I hope that was an interesting talk.
It was. Could you send the slides?
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Verify. I see. Yeah, you possibly have.
Volgens mij half toch?
Can I send the slides to you? And you pass them on? Yeah, sure. Okay, because I have you in my WhatsApp. And that means